Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee meeting of January 10th, 2023 to order. First off, the land acknowledgement. Niagara Region and Grimsby are situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations such as the Hattaway-Wendoronk, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The regional municipality of Niagara and the town of Grimsby stand with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we need a mover and seconder for approval of the agenda. Moved by Member Evans, seconded by Riley, Member Riley. Sorry, my first meeting. Moved by Member Evans, second by Member Riley. Resolved that the agenda for the January 10th, 2023 Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee meeting be approved. All in favor? That's carried. I guess everyone's over there. All right, thank you. Now we move to introductions. Sure, go ahead, Bianca.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Jordan. I'm Bianca Vrecchia, and I'm the Heritage Planner at the Town of Grimsby. And
thank you, through you, Mayor Jordan. I'm Garrett France Wiley, Heritage Planner at the Town of Grimsby.
Did I press the right button? Yeah, I did. Good evening, Brian Riley. I'm also a volunteer on the committee.
Jennifer Korstanji, Ward 3 Councillor.
And I'm Mayor Jeff Jordan, and I'm the temporary chair of the committee. And we have Councillor DeFlavio, who's a member of the committee, and he is here now. Now we move to the clerk with the update. Katie?
Hi, everyone. My name's Katie Vichica. I'm filling in as deputy clerk for Peter Todd while he is off on paternity leave. And although I'm new to the role, I'm looking forward to working together with you this year. So I'm just going to share my screen. I have a bit of a clerk update here. One sec, bear with me. Oh, there we go. How do I move that? All right, so I just want to do a quick procedure review here. With the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee being a committee of council, the town's procedural bylaw should be utilized. So if you wish to speak, please raise your hand and wait to be recognized by the chair. A member may initially speak to an item of business or a motion for 5 minutes. On notice of the time limit, you'll hear a little ring of an alarm. You may request an additional 5 minutes, and this shall be put to vote without debate. A member might speak to the same item or motion a second time for a further 3 minutes, and on notice of that time limit, an additional 5 may be requested. Again, this shall be put to vote without debate. If a meeting goes beyond 11 o'clock p.m., a consenting vote of the majority of members present must pass in order to extend the meeting, and all participants are responsible for maintaining an orderly meeting free from insulting language, assigning blame, personal attacks, or condemning the motives of others. And do you want me to do the roll? Okay, and I'm just going to quickly go over, before we do elections of the chair and vice chair, I just would like to go over these quick. So the role of the chair is to preside over the conduct of the meeting, including the preservation of order and decorum. They call the meeting to order. They ensure quorum is established and maintained throughout the meeting. They will announce business in the order in which it is considered, put to vote all motions that are moved and seconded when necessary, and announce the vote of the result. the result of the vote, sorry. They will decline to put to vote motions that infringe upon the rules of procedure, and adjourning the meeting when business is concluded or at 11 o'clock PM unless otherwise determined by a majority vote of the members present. And then the role of the vice chair is to assume all roles and responsibilities of the chair in their absence.
All right, now we're moving to number 8, or number 7, election of chair portion. Is there any member that wants to stand as chair?
If nobody else wants to do it, I'll do it. I've chaired before, but I'm happy to give it to anybody else who would like the job.
Well, Councilor DeFlavio, it looks like you've chosen yourself. So how do we? Yeah, so what, now I'll step down and you can assume the chair.
I apologize.
Councilor
in advance.
DeFlavio?
I had some extra garlic and lamb after I just finished cooking, so.
Well, I'll move down to your seat then.
And I'm prepared. All right, thank you, everybody. I'd like to say that I appreciate your confidence in me, but I feel like it's more like a negative appointment, but I'll try my best to do everything correctly. So our first item on the agenda
So we're going to be electing the vice chair now.
is the election of vice chair. Do we have anybody that'd like to put their name forward for vice chair? Okay, so we have, Jennifer wants to put, is gonna do, vice chair. Can you put her?
So first, we're gonna have the committee vote on you becoming the chair. So I've got the resolution here. We're just gonna
Okay.
mover and seconder, and then I'll give this to Councilor Costangi.
I feel like this should have been done before I got here, but we have a resolution that I be elected as chair of the committee, of the Grimsby Heritage Advisory Committee. I need a mover and a seconder, please.
Do you have a pen?
I don't. I apologize for not knowing everybody's name yet. So do you mind,
Yep, so who moved it?
Jennifer moved it? Yeah.
So we can put Jennifer Costangi. And who's the seconder?
Everybody put their hand up.
Okay, so we'll do Brian Riley. There you go.
I feel this is embarrassing. I wasn't prepared. Okay, I have a motion moved by Councilor Costangi, second by,
Brian Riley.
by Brian Riley. Resolved that Nick DeFlavio be elected as chair of the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee. All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Next, we have a resolution that Jennifer Costangi be elected as vice chair of the Heritage Advisory Grimsby Committee. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Riley, seconded by,
Who was the seconder? Sorry, I didn't see it. Pamela Evans.
Evans.
Pamela
I knew Pamela. I didn't know. Second, moved by member Riley, seconded by member Evans. All in favor? That's carried.
Can we have adoption of the previous minutes?
I have a motion resolved that the Grimsby Heritage Advisory Committee minutes of July 12th, 2022 be approved. I need a mover and a seconder. Member Evans, seconded by member Riley. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you.
Verbal updates.
Okay, we have verbal updates is next on the agenda. 10.1, Heritage Conservation Districts. Bianca?
Thank you, through you, the chair. So I wanted to give a brief update on the Heritage Conservation District along Main Street East. So the study was nearing the final stages of the first phase when the province brought forward substantial legislative changes to the process of designation. With these changes requiring proclamation prior to implementation, the study was put on hold. These legislative changes received proclamation on January 4th, 2023. So we have a meeting tomorrow with our consultants to discuss next steps. The consultants' recommendation report and recommendations will need to be, will need to be brought into conformity with the new legislation. So happy to answer any questions about that.
Member Evans?
Can you tell us what the changes will be?
Bianca, if you could.
Thank you, through the chair. So I will be addressing that in the Bill 23 update report a little later. But for the actual district, there's new criteria for a district that will have to be assessed. And then there was some other changes throughout the the Heritage Act that will need to be updated within the recommendation report. So they're essentially going to be reassessing all of the information they received against the new criteria.
Sorry. Town of Lincoln had an in-person meeting, and we're, maybe it would be nice if we had one. We have not had one. The first one, I believe, was October of 2021, and the other one was September of 2022, and both were by Zoom. And I think it's far more engaging for the community to be in person.
So, to clarify, the next meeting for the Heritage Conservation District, do we have a date for, an update on that?
Through you, the chair. So the legislative changes just came into effect on January 4th. So we're meeting with our consultants tomorrow, and we'll see how much of this is actually going to be changed from the initial study that was completed. And then we're hoping to have a new framework, and then we'll update the Let's Talk with all the new dates, and then we'll definitely address the in-person meeting.
Yeah, I agree with you. The meetings need to go back to in-person. There's a greater accountability when people are standing right in front of you than at a distance, so I agree that the next, and I don't think that anybody would disagree that the next meeting should definitely be in person. All right, any other questions or comments on the Heritage Conservation District 10.1? Seeing none, we can move to, we need a motion to receive the update. We need a mover and a seconder. by Member Evans, seconded by Councillor Cristanchi. All in favor? That's carried. Next, we have agenda item 10.2, National Trust article. The link was included. Bianca?
Thank you, through you, the chair. I'm very excited to share with the committee an article that was written by the Executive Director of the National Trust for Canada. Natalie provided an overview of all the hard work we've been doing in Grimsby as we continue to protect, commemorate, and understand all facets of our diverse history. So we look forward to continuing to grow and strengthen our heritage protections over this next term of council. And I also wanted to give a very special thank you to everyone within the community that contributed to these accomplishments. So thank you.
Thank you, Bianca. Any questions or comments on the article on National Trust? Oh, sorry, Member Riley?
Not a question, just kudos to Bianca, Garrett, fabulous work there. It's great getting the recognition for all the work that you do and all the blood, sweat, and tears you put into it. So huge congrats to you both and everyone else that's been involved in that.
Hear, hear. Mayor Jordan?
Thank you, Chair DeFlavio. I just, again, kudos to staff for really seeing and really having a vested interest what heritage means to Grimsby and all of Ontario for that matter, but especially Grimsby. I've always been a person that's echoed that we had the first town meeting April 5th, 1790, 4 years ahead of Niagara-on-the-Lake. And I think heritage matters, and heritage is the reason why Grimsby's like it is. And we need to fight tooth and nail, especially given what we've been got from the provincial government, to preserve the fabric of our community, and you guys are doing a great job at working towards that. So again, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. Any other questions or comments? Just to reiterate what Mayor Jordan and Member Riley already said, I think that throughout the town's history, one of the reoccurring themes has been the preservation of history. Heritage has always been a unifier. Some people have, may have disagreed on other things, but the preservation of heritage is always something that's brought the town together, and the importance of preserving heritage, whether it's cultural, built, or natural heritage, those are all an important part of Grimsby. We have the escarpment on one side of us and the lake on the other that have helped to shape the town, that have created the climate that made Grimsby the place where peaches were grown and helped to build the community. And if we don't preserve the homes and the buildings that were built, we're gonna forget where we came from. So I think that preservation is really important, and I'm happy to see that we're being recognized for it, but we need to continue to fight tooth and nail, as Mayor Jordan said, to make sure that is an ongoing history that our grandkids could look back on and enjoy as well. Do we need to accept that? All right. I need a mover and a seconder to receive the verbal update regarding the National Trust article. Moved by Member Riley, seconded by Mayor Jordan. All in favor of accepting that verbal report? That's carried. Thank you. Next, we have agenda item 11, a memorandum regarding 155 Main Street West, proposed minor variance. Tino Gabriel, Massimo and Angelina Longo, and Megan Hobson to comment on this item. So we'll start with there's a report and or a presentation, and then we'll allow the speakers afterwards. I'll allow you to come up and ask questions or speak at the microphone. Thank you.
Through you, the chair. So I just wanted to note, we're here tonight to get comments from the committee on the heritage aspects of this site. I will also let you know that this is a binder variance application that will be coming forward. If there's any items outside of heritage you'd like to provide comment on, you can attend the hearing. But tonight will be focused on the heritage elements. So I have a quick presentation for you. So the property owners at 155 Main Street West are in the process of applying for a minor variance application for the proposed development of a 2-story residential dwelling. The minor variance application is for an increase in lot coverage. The proposed development is directly beside the designated heritage property at 159 Main Street West, which was designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and there's an image of that house on the slide. So after reviewing all the submitted documents, Heritage Planning staff have concluded that they are supportive of the application as the proposed dwelling is compatible with, subordinate to, and distinguishable from the heritage resource. In addition, Heritage Planning staff are also supportive of the setback of the building as it provides sufficient visual accessibility to the heritage resource at 159 Main Street West. Alternative designs have been prepared by the property owners to address concerns regarding the overall proportions and design of the dwelling, with a focus on the front portico. So I'll provide a short overview of each of the 2 designs and what was changed. So in the first design, this includes a peaked roof on the portico with square columns and the use of traditional materials. This design provides a contrast to the heritage portico while still incorporating the traditional materials. And then the summary of the revisions for the alternative design. It has a flat roof with tiered fascia boards and half columns. This design provides a more modern look in contrast to the heritage building. The flat shape with the use of modern materials will allow this porch to be a product of today and will not compete with the heritage or the historic porch. And I will also note that the property owners prefer this design to the peaked roof. And then in summary, again, Heritage Planning staff are supportive of either of the proposed designs and find the proposed dwelling to be in keeping with best practices, and further that the proposed dwelling is compatible with the character along Main Street West. I also wanted to note that staff would not be supportive of the new building being rendered in a white stucco. So we just wanted to note that. It hasn't yet been proposed as that, but we just wanted to note it. And that if it was to be rendered in a stucco, that we'd want it to be in a contrasting color so that the new house doesn't compete with the designated dwelling. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Any questions from members of the committee? Member Evans?
So I wanted to know to the homeowners that are going to be building this home, if they have a preference. I think there's been 2 styles proposed that are very nice, but I do think there should be input from the homeowner instead of just us as a committee. And I wanted to know, are you thinking of the stucco in white? Was that a thought? I do know white homes are very popular, and we can see why because of the heritage home beside it. They're essentially timeless, but I just wondered if that was a consideration that you had when you were thinking of developing this home.
Yeah, if you don't mind coming to the microphone.
Actually, the stucco is not a consideration. It might be a minor element for the second story, perhaps around windows or something like that, but white stucco was not part of the plan, no.
Now, you are on the agenda as wanting to comment, or is
I just filled out the form just in case we had to answer any questions that you guys may have, but there's no formal presentation or anything like that from our point, so.
Are you Dino?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Dino. There might be other questions for you, so
Sure.
if you don't mind, we'll call you back up if the.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Bianca? Yeah, Councilor Costangi?
Thanks. Just to clarify, so, because I walked by the property, that house, it's a small little wooded lot there. Is this an extension of the other house that's beside it, going into the lot, or this is a whole new build within that small lot?
Bianca?
Through you, the chair, it is a separate lot.
So if I'm not mistaken, this is the lot that was severed from the, there was a large parcel of land that was part of the escarpment land, and then severed and sold off, and then it was, there was a previous proposal on this land that was significantly larger and denied, and this is the new proposal that is more in keeping with what we want in that area. Is that an accurate summary of this property, Bianca?
I was just going to add, it is new owners. The owners have changed, yeah, and they've, in the decision of the previous, they required a heritage impact assessment, comments from Heritage, and I believe an archaeological assessment, so they've gone and done all these things now.
So yeah, it was a contentious property in the past because it was a parcel of land that I think was owned by, was it owned by the Escarpment Commission, or was it owned by, and then it was severed, but anyway, it's not important, but there was a lot of debate because of the neighboring property. So I'm happy to see that our heritage planners are satisfied with the design as it's come forward. And as far as lot coverage and things like that are concerned, if people have other concerns about it, those will be dealt with at the site plan or at the minor variance application. We're here to talk about the heritage nature of the property. So does anybody have any other questions or comments about the heritage? Member Riley?
Through you, Chair. Bianca, is the two proposed, is the committee supposed to comment on those, like the two designs? Can you just clarify what the purpose of having those in the report is and what if there's anything that the committee is supposed to be doing on that piece?
Bianca?
Thank you. Through the chair, these were just two designs that we had worked with the property owners on. I know they prefer the more modern with the flat roof. That was their preference, but they were okay with either one, and we thought we'd bring it to the committee to get some thoughts from you guys.
Thank you. Do we know what the final material of the facade is going to be? Is it going to be brick? Is it going to be board? There's a bunch of different materials mentioned, but do you know offhand what the final product is going to be?
I can build the house, it's not going to be what you guys are.
I think that we've heard. Yeah, no, I think that we've heard that, what the planners don't want is a replica of the house that's there, something that's a contrast of it. As long as it's a nice home and it meets the character of Main Street, I prefer something that looks like it was built 100 years ago. Personally, so it doesn't matter if it's board or if it's brick, but something that uses traditional colors, that looks like it's been there for a long time, in my opinion, is something that I'd like to see. I don't want to see something modern there, but that's just my opinion. There's different opinions on that because some people believe that something modern is a good contrast to the heritage house. It makes the heritage home pop more. I'm more of it should fit the character of that street and look like it's always been there, in my opinion. So I don't know what the rest of the committee feels like, but that's, I like a house that looks like it's always fit on Main Street West. So, if you could do something like that.
Well, you guys told me a second what you guys wanted. Where are you going? You want it black, white, green? I'm okay.
Are you Mr. Longo?
Yes.
Okay. I don't think that anybody's going to tell you, Bianca, if you want to comment, I don't think anybody's going to tell you exactly what it should be, but more like what it should be like, so, Bianca, if you want to comment?
Thank you, through you, the chair. So we'll be bringing Heritage comments to the Committee of Adjustment. I'm going to just bring some of the comments from the committee that you're comfortable with both designs. And then at the end of the day, we'll work with the property owners with what's in keeping with best practice.
Frankly, the designs, because they're like black and white renderings, are very difficult to imagine, you know, so it's saying that we're comfortable with both designs. I don't know if that, I'm speaking for myself, I don't want to speak for the committee, but it's impossible to know what that's going to look like when it's completed, because it's, you know, there's no color and there's no material on it's just a flat, so it could, I mean, the way that they're presented, it's white stucco, which is the opposite of what you said you wanted. So I don't know, I'm comfortable with the design in general, but it's not specific enough for me to say that that's something that I would agree to, if that makes sense. So do we want to talk about materials, or is that too specific a discussion?
Through you, the chair. I think at this point, it's definitely about the massing and proportions and things like that. As we move forward, we'll be able to guide some of those pieces. And I think as long as it's in keeping with best practices, I think they'll probably have somewhat of a traditional material if they're having that more modern opening, or the idea is we're not mimicking the house next door. So if there's some kind of contrast, I think we can definitely work towards something like that, but I think at this point it's more about massing and the general shape of the building and how it fits into the landscape. So a portico is next door, so a portico here would be okay. We just don't want this portico and the portico next door to look identical. So if the committee prefers a more traditional material, then I would say maybe lean towards the peak so that it doesn't look like two traditional flat top porticos next to each other. If we're leaning towards what the property owners would like, having the flat roof, then I would recommend it be more modern materials so it doesn't mimic the porch.
Mayor Jordan?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to echo your comments about the streetscape, and I would much rather prefer something that looks like it's been there as long as other houses. I think it just portrays the area of Main Street, both east and west, better if there are houses that are sympathetic to the older houses that are there in that way. Personally, I'm not much for modern houses anyway, since I moved from an old house to an older house. So. But yeah, I just rather see like traditional brick, stone, something like that, construction materials, and again, something that fits in the period of the White House. Thank you.
Thank you. My only other comment is staff looked at this design. Garages fronting onto Main Street West and prominent like this are obviously not something that would have been common in an older house. I know that it's not an older house, it's a modern house, but it is in an older neighborhood. I don't know the dimensions of the property and if that garage can be turned so that it's window in the front and garage is entry from the side, but you know, I prefer that. I prefer a house that looks like all windows in the front. And you could have 5 garages, I don't care how, but you know, do you know what I mean? Like, so that it's designed so that the front of the house is windows and then you enter the garage from the side. I don't know if you have that amount of property on the site. That's more of the minor variance thing, but it is also a visual and heritage aspect that I think we might want to address as a committee. Bianca, do you have comments on that?
Sure, I was just going to share through you, the chair. This is a pretty tight site, and with the toe of the escarpment at the rear, they also have buffers that they have to respect from the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority. So I don't know if Dina would like to add additional context, but it sounds like this is them just getting it in just right. I don't know how much wiggle room they have for the garage, but I don't know if you wanted to address that, but I will take all your comments from the material standpoint and pass those along to Dino as well. So, yeah.
Do you have any comments on that, Dino?
Excuse me, we did discuss possible courtyard style, where
Yeah.
you're suggesting bring the garage forward. the issue is the rear yard setback, the further you set the house back, but the only way you can maintain that setback is by keeping it forward, which means we're encroaching on the front yard.
Okay,
Being on Main Street, I think it's going to be kind of tough.
Yeah.
Step in the lot in order to achieve that.
that's fair
That was
enough.
our initial idea, to be honest.
And you're going to go with like a coach door, like a sort of traditional sort of garage doors?
Oh, garage doors?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just like regular overhead doors, right?
Yeah, no, but you can get them that, you can get a more of a traditional look to them, just to, yeah, obviously, if there's restrictions on the property that prohibit it, then you can't do it. I'm of the belief that, there shouldn't really be a garage fronting onto Main Street West there, but if you can't do it, you can't do it. Yep, Member Evans?
So a question to Bianca. My understanding is we're not supposed to mimic heritage. So what is the line here in terms of style and materials then, so that we're not doing that? I do think either style that has come forward is very tastefully done. But if we're going to start getting into talking about adding materials that might mimic heritage, is that not contradictory to what the Heritage Act states for new builds? I'd just like some clarification, please.
Go ahead, Bianca.
Through you, the chair. Yeah, so our goal is to make something that's a product of today and that doesn't blur the lines between the two. So I think you can have a traditional material if that's what we'd like to see on Main Street, but then I would pair that with the modern openings or the modern porch so that it's very clear that this is not a historic building, because it detracts. I know there's also another A-framed structure on the other side that we want to make sure we're not detracting from as well, and make sure that this looks like a product of today, and then the heritage ones can maintain the character.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on that? Yeah. Councillor Cristangi?
I have to agree, actually. I find when we try to replicate heritage to fit into the area, it kind of detracts from the heritage. Along Main Street West, we do have modernized homes, and they fit in nicely. The design too that's more modernized will fit in, because it fits in with the rest down the street, and I think it will sort of make the heritage stand out that is beside it and that is across from it.
Thank you. I am of the opposite opinion, and, everybody's going to have their opinion. The new houses that I like on Main Street West are the larger homes that were built just east of Roberts Road, that are set back and built in a style that is in a heritage style, that are on large properties and look like they were built, they were meant to replicate what was torn down on those sites. I don't think anybody's going to mistake a new home for an old one. There's going to be a poured concrete basement. There's going to be a lot of things that make it look modern and other modern characteristics. But I still think that when you put something modern, unless it's, something that is extremely modern and the opposite of what's there, I don't want to see a house that looks like it should have been built in a subdivision. Is what I mean, like a cookie cutter house on Main Street. Those are the houses on Main Street that I don't like. There's some closer to Roberts Road that were the same as all the houses in the subdivision behind them. I don't think that those meet the characteristics that we want on Main Street West or on Main Street at all in Grimsby, and I prefer a heritage style. I don't think anybody's going to mistake them for the heritage buildings. The heritage buildings have plaques on them. It's pretty clear which ones are the heritage buildings and which ones aren't. But when you drive down the street and you see a house that looks like, it belongs in a Brampton subdivision, it doesn't belong on Main Street. And I don't want to see that type of house on Main Street personally. So, any other questions or comments from the committee? Yeah, Member Evans.
Riley.
O'Reilly, sorry.
It's all good. Just going back to the heritage impact assessment, I noticed that the recommendations in there, one of them is related to that the homeowners or the builders provide further details on the materials. So that's in the report there, and I wonder if maybe we just refer to that and have that come back. I don't know if we can or not. Maybe it's more of a question of can we just have that come back? Because it sounds like there's some different opinions, or there's certainly opinions about the building materials, and perhaps it's worth just having a further discussion about that and see if there's any ability to kind of work together and find a solution that most people are pleased with.
Go ahead, Bianca.
I was just going to maybe have Walter weigh in. I know previously, prior to Bill 23, we would have had a site plan on the site, and that's when I think we would have addressed these materials and had additional comment.
You have to use the,
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Detached homes used to be subject to site plan control. They're not anymore. So we have no mechanism to require things like you're discussing. It's only through this process, and the only reason this is coming up is because they're required to do a heritage impact assessment as a condition of complete application for a minor variance application. So if it wasn't a minor variance application, it was just simply a building permit, we wouldn't be anywhere.
okay, so in other words, if there wasn't a minor variance, it would have been building whatever was allowed within the site, and there would be no discussion of materials. We're not going to get a consensus on the materials, I don't think, even if it comes back again. I think everybody has a different opinion. I think, Mr. Longo, you've heard what the committee has to say, that, you know, I think that you're going to build a nice house, and it's, what I prefer, and, you know, is that it looks like it belongs there, and it's not just another house, you know, so it is a very important site in Grimsby. Main Street is really important for us, and we just want you to treat it with the respect we think it deserves.
No, I don't respect.
Okay, yeah.
I like to know where you guys exactly want it.
Yeah,
That way I don't have to go change my drawing, change this,
Yep.
change that, get delayed. Like, it's about a year I've been going back and forth.
Yeah.
Cost me a lot of money to get all the report done, everything you guys asked for, I got it. If you guys tell me what do you want, brick, stone, stucco, you tell me exactly what you want. The color, what do you want, I will resolve you. So I know exactly what you guys want, because there's no use
Yeah.
back and forth. We spend 2 months, and come back, and we start all over again.
yeah, I understand that, I agree.
If I know exactly what you guys want,
Yeah,
I do.
I don't think we're going to be able to tell you what we want. I think it's going to be up to you to decide. So, which is, you know.
Yeah, but how can I design a house if I bring it to you guys and you guys don't like that?
Well, this is it. This is us Bianca's going to have a report at the Committee of Adjustment, and it'll have some, you know, kind of summarize everything we had to say. But there's not one of us can tell you, and I think that that's the point that our planners are saying, is not one of us is going to tell you what to do. We're just going to tell you what not to do, and that is make sure it doesn't look exactly like the house right next door. And, yeah, and then other than that, it's going to be up to you. If you're going to ask me, I would have one opinion, and I think every member would have a different opinion. So we're not going to be the ones that tell you.
I gotta go talk to the guy next door to me, the homeowner, and ask him, what do you want him to see in that house or on that lot? I'm gonna please him, how is he going?
Very good idea.
If you tell me something, if you tell me what do you want, I get the drawing down, you like it, you happy, I'm happy.
Me too.
Okay, so we have a resolution. Any other questions or comments? Member Evans?
So since the committee seemed to have said either a home plan would appeal to the committee, does this help move them forward?
Bianca?
Through you, the chair. Yes, we'll have these comments like Councillor DeFlavio said, we'll have these comments incorporated into our memorandum/report we send to Committee of Adjustment. And so ultimately, we're just seeing if there's an impact by them allowing this minor variance to move forward. So we'll provide some of these comments, and then I'll continue to work with the property owners on the next steps.
Any other questions or comments? I need a mover and a seconder that the staff comments to receive I'll read it. Resolved that the committee endorses the staff comments within the heritage analysis of proposed minor variance application at 155 Main Street West memorandum, and that the comments be submitted to the Committee of Adjustment. I need a mover and a seconder. Member Riley and Stangy. All in favor? That's carried. So, Mr. Longo, that means that the two designs that were in there, the committee likes them both. Bianca's going to give you more details before your next meeting, but thank you for coming tonight. We appreciate your patience. Like I said, it is a very important property for us, though, and so that's why you're being forced. You know, if you picked an empty lot in the middle of a subdivision that was empty, you would just have to meet the requirements of that subdivision, but because it's Main Street and because it's such an important site to us, we take it very seriously. So I'm looking forward to see the beautiful home that you're going to build there.
Well, that's why my Scotland behind me.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Our next agenda item is Report 12.1, Information Report regarding 44 Park Road North Easement Agreement. Garrett? I think that you're the one speaking about this. For future reference, Katie, I like people's last names on here, so if you, I feel uncomfortable calling you by your first names. It's just not, like, it doesn't feel like I should be calling people by their first names. I know that you're okay with that, and I'm okay with you calling me Nick too, but at a meeting, I feel I'd prefer to have people's last names. So, okay. So for today, Garrett, and then next time we'll do it a little more formally.
Thank you, through you, the chair. The following report has been prepared to provide the committee with background and information regarding the recommendation to enter into an easement agreement between the town of Grimsby and the property owners of 44 Park Road North. On September 16th, 2022, town staff were made aware of the demolition of a structure on a dwelling located at 44 Park Road North, which is listed on the Municipal Heritage Register as a property council believes to be of cultural heritage value or interest. On September 16th, 2022, town staff conducted a site visit to 44 Park Road North and found that the porch on the dwelling had been demolished without council approval. Due to the property being listed on the Municipal Heritage Register, any demolition that requires a building permit will also need to be approved by council. The homeowners were informed that the demolition was done without the required approvals as outlined in the Ontario Heritage Act. Prior to the purchase of the home, the property owners did reach out to Heritage staff regarding the heritage protections on their site. Heritage planning staff did inform the property owners that the approval from council was required prior to the removal of any structures on the property. Town staff have completed an impact assessment based on the impacts to the significance of the building following the demolition of the porch. Staff utilized the Ontario Regulation 56922 to determine the extent of the impacts to the heritage resource. Within our assessment, it was concluded that the removal of the porch affected some of the notable Queen Anne identifying features of the home, but the removal of the porch did not directly impact the property's merit for designation to the extent where a criteria was weakened or nullified based on the contravention of the Ontario Heritage Act. Following the completion of our assessment, it was concluded that this resource was a very culturally significant site and that its long-term protection was a priority. The property owners are supportive of this pursuit of designation. However, they do want to ensure that the heritage resource can be secured during the winter months. Due to the nature of the designation process and the process of obtaining permits while within an active notice of intention to designate is very difficult, and depending on the type of application, they are often considered void until the under the Ontario Heritage Act until the designation process is fully complete. Thus, it is being recommended by Heritage staff that the town enter into an easement agreement as outlined within the Ontario Heritage Act with the property owners at 44 Park Road North to ensure that the resource is protected until designation is pursued. Next slide, please, Katie. Oh, yeah, that is it, thanks. Heritage staff recommended the following permitted work should be included within the agreement. Restoration and construction of the front porch, including the removal of a structurally unstable piers, existing decking, and replacement of original porch roof framing. A structural assessment of the existing elements shall be conducted by a professional heritage structural engineer indicating their suitability or their unsuitability and the requirement of their removal. If original elements are deemed to be suitable, then they shall be retained and restored. The professional heritage structural assessment shall be submitted with the building permit application. The permitted alterations do not include the removal of the original foundations. Further, the permitted works also do not include the removal of the original foundations that extended beneath the original porch. All proposed works are to be reviewed by town staff through the associated building permit. A detailed scope of works and conservation plan shall be submitted to enable staff to fully review the proposed works and ensure that they are completed in accordance with the standards and guidelines of historic places in Canada. Construction of the rear deck completed in accordance with the approved building permit identified as 2022-0317. Interior works completed in accordance with the approved building permit identified as 2022-0318. Maintenance and replacement of existing gutters. Maintenance work to fascia boards during the installation of gutters. All maintenance work should be completed in accordance with best practices as outlined within the standards and guidelines for historic places in Canada. These best practices include, where necessary, rotted material should be replaced with in-kind materials that are compatible with the characteristics of the original heritage fabric. Town staff shall be consulted where significant rot has been identified to ensure that the heritage resource is appropriately restored. That's the next slide, the porch. Thank you, Katie. You can see on the screen the newly proposed porch. Staff find that the new design is distinguishable, compatible, and subordinate to the heritage resource, so that there is a differentiation between the new and old construction. Following the removal of the porch, town staff requested that the property owners provide drawings and plans for the proposed new porch for review. The newly proposed porch will have a shed-style roof with square columns and modern decking, and helical piles will be introduced into the structural system. The property owners town staff are supportive of the new design proposed by the property owners as it is in keeping with best practices as outlined within the standards and guidelines for historic places in Canada and provides a clear delineation between the original fabric and the newly added layer. Next slide, please, Katie. So I'm going to go into the designation of the building a little bit. So we analyzed the building against the new criteria, and we found that the property meets the criteria for design and physical value because 44 Park Road North is a 2.5-story red brick building built in the Queen Anne style. Key physical attributes include the decorative terracotta panels, stone windowsills, arched windows, red brick, and tall chimneys. The structure displays unique and rare terracotta embossed medallions and plaques. The designs would have been created by sculptors before being casted with molds and mass-produced. Many of the designs on the structure can be found in historic catalogs from the Grimsby Brick and Tile Company. The local brick-making company was located on Highway 8 near Durham Road. We found that the property meets the criteria for historical and associative value because the property has direct associations with important figures in Grimsby's past, starting with the neutral peoples who inhabited the land before the arrival of Loyalist settlement. The first Loyalist arrivals were descendants of Jacob Book and his family, who originally settled in Grimsby in 1797. The Book family farmed and subdivided the original Crown Land Grant. The Queen Anne-style residence we see today was built in 1896 by James Marlowe, who was a farmer with multiple businesses in Grimsby, as well as being a road commissioner. Marlowe was very well liked by the Indigenous families he employed, so much so that they named him an honorary chief, and one of the terracotta panels on the residence depicts this history, which you can see in the top right. We also found that the property meets the criteria for contextual value because at the time of the house's construction, Park Road still connected the neighborhood to Grimsby Beach. Park Road was also the site of the Grand Trunk Railroad Station and the nearby Gadsby Shoe Factory. During the turn of the century, Park Road would have become developed with the current surrounding building stock, with a large majority of the neighboring parcels being subdivided from the property at 44 Park Road North. The historic house and fruit barn sits on one of the larger lots on the street with a deep setback and a central placement on the lot. The original fruit barn to the rear east side of the property represents the former agricultural use of the lot. In summary, staff recommend that the town of Grimsby enter into an easement agreement with the property owners of 44 Park Road North to ensure that the resource is protected until designation can be pursued. Further, that once the permitted works are completed, that the heritage resource at 44 Park Road North be designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Thank you. Back to you, the chair.
Thank you, Garrett. Are the owners here tonight?
Through you, the chair, not tonight.
Okay. Questions or comments for Garrett from the committee? Mr. Riley?
Through you, the chair. Thanks, Garrett, for the overview there. A couple of questions. So, if I understood correctly, they were aware it was on the register, and then they still demoed the porch. Burning question is, what was their response to when you confronted them about the demolition?
Bianca?
Oh.
Through you, the chair, I'll just answer this one. I was on site the day it happened. So I guess there was some miscommunication between them and the people completing the work. But they were quickly agreed to work with us, and we wanted to move forward in the best way possible, and they agreed with the preservation of the building. And so they were agreeable to this route, and they did want to see the building designated. So we're doing our best to work with them, but at the same time, maintaining such an important resource.
Yes, Member Riley?
Through the chair. Was it being demolished because it was in disrepair? Was it being demolished to be rebuilt in a different style? What was the purpose of, and it sounds like it was a miscommunication with their builder, but what was the work that they were actually commissioning that some miscommunication led to the full demo on?
Bianca?
Thank you. Through you, the chair. So my understanding was, in many cases, I hear this, they've thought it was going to be just like repair work, and then as they get going, it starts deteriorating more. But I was very clear that at that point, they should have contacted us. So this is a contravention of the act, so we are taking it very serious, and so we let them know that work had to stop immediately, and the condition is now has not changed, and they ultimately, I guess it started as they were going to be repairing the porch, and then they continued to find more rot. So that's my understanding of what happened.
Any other questions? Yeah, Member Evans?
So I'm hearing it wasn't intentional. Was there structural issues with the porch? To start off with, that needed to be repaired. I'm just wondering how you get to this stage. And did they have credible workers doing the job? I know the challenge with heritage homes, sometimes that comes, but there is a process that we're all expected to follow. And for those of us that have heritage and follow the rules. My other question is, in terms of an easement, is an easement generally not for perpetuity? Or can it just be temporary until the work is completed?
Bianca?
Through you, the chair, I think there's kind of two questions there. I'll address the easement first. So the easement agreement will stay on title until the designation's been completely finished, and then the easement will be lifted, and then the designation will be registered on title. So this is just so that they don't get caught up in the notice of intention to designate, and then they can't obtain the permits they need. So this is just so that the work can be done safely and appropriately while town staff is watching and reviewing and approving all the work. And then once that's finished, it'll be designated and treated just like any other designated site moving forward. So heritage permits and all that will be required for future work. So this is just so that they don't get stuck in it, because the notice of intention to designate can take anywhere from 60 to 90 days.
So to clarify, it wasn't a designated home, so they didn't have to follow the rules of a designated home, right?
Sorry, through you, the chair, they did need to. So it's on the register. I did speak with the property owners when they bought the property, and they were told that if any demolition were to take place, you need to provide notice to council. They didn't do that. We caught them in the middle of the demolition. I can't speak to the full integrity of the structure because a lot of it was down by the time I got to it. So I can't speak into the integrity of it at that point, but I'm sure there could have been some remediation that took place that enabled some of the historic material to be maintained. And so that's why, in speaking with them, we wanted to go down this road with the easement agreement, protect the structure, and also have the committee put some comment into the porch and try to have this be a positive way of maintaining the building in the end. But yes, they should have went down the proper routes.
Okay, my apologies. I misunderstood. Sorry, you had another comment, Member Evans?
I just wanted to confirm, I believe Garrett had said that they are in full agreement to designation at the end of this. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so they're confirming, yes, they are, and that was what was clarified in the report as well. From my perspective, I've only driven by that house a couple of times. I was part of the register process of creating the register. I didn't know all these really neat characteristics were part of this home. The terracotta that you provided photos of are going to give me a reason to go up and look at. They're going to have me on their front lawn, unfortunately, but I didn't know that all those neat features were there because it was covered by the trees. So hopefully something positive will come out of this. People will be aware that this beautiful home and with these really unique characteristics exists in Grimsby. This is exactly what we want to do, is to preserve these homes. If the porch was, we have to take the homeowner's word for it because staff wasn't able to see it in time, but if the porch needed to be replaced, it needed to be replaced, but as long as we're, in the end, designating the entire house and preserving those characteristics that you mentioned in your report, I'm really happy that this is a sort of a terrible way to get to the result that we want, and I'm looking forward to warm weather where I can go stand in front of it and kind of spy at those neat terracotta features that you mentioned in your report. Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Member Evans? Riley, sorry.
All right.
I apologize.
Oh, good. Through you, the chair. Bianca, just with the easement, so I just took a note from what Garrett had said about the town staff. You're okay with the design based on the proposed materials. Will those be a condition of the easement and granting that? Like, is that going to be baked into there so that they do have to follow through? I mean, I recognize that there's there was some issues with what happened and with the builders or the repair people, but just so we don't get down another path where suddenly, oops, it changes again. Is that condition, I guess, to summarize?
Bianca?
Thank you. Through you, the chair. So I think that's a great comment and something we'll look at, potentially making the comments from Heritage Committee a part of the easement agreement. But they will be required to show us all of these drawings before obtaining their building permit, and we'll be making sure that it's been done appropriately. And I just wanted to add, in this situation, we were able to take this route because none of the criteria were nullified, and it didn't directly impact the reason for for designation. If this was in an event where it was a very significant addition, or if it was a very significant resource that was taken down, that's a different route we would have to take through the Heritage Act. So we're able to go down this route because of that assessment. So I just wanted to stress that as well, and I do hope this to be a positive, positive outcome for the resource.
Thank you, Bianca. Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? I have a motion to receive the report. I need a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Cristangi. Member Evans. Resolved that the information report HR 2301 44 Park Road North easement agreement be received, and that the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee recommend that staff prepare the associated heritage easement agreement for property at 44 Park Road North, and that the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee recommend that property at 44 Park Road North be designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act after the permitted work outlined within the agreement are completed. That's moved by Councillor Cristangi, seconded by Member Evans. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Next, we have Report 12.1, new regulations under Heritage Act Bill 23. Bianca?
Thank you, through the chair. I do have a slide for your reference. These are some of our recommendations, but I'll quickly give a presentation. So on October 25th, 2022, the province introduced a new bill known as Bill 23, the More Homes Built Faster Act. This bill proposed to introduce various amendments to multiple statutes, and the Ontario Heritage Act was one of those provincial statutes that were impacted by Bill 23. So I'm going to give you an overview of some of the most impactful changes, and then I'm going to give a brief summary how this is going to directly affect us. So new legislation requiring that properties on the register be removed after 2 years. The property will also not be allowed to be added back for 5 additional years. This will affect over 500 properties within our community. This legislation is forcing communities to force an unattainable number of buildings the review of unattainable number of buildings prior to their loss of protection. For our community, this is over 500 properties within 2 years. And just for your reference, an exhaustive designation can take upwards of a month to complete. So that's one property. So it is a very significant impact. New legislation requiring a property to be on the register prior to designation when an application has been received under the Planning Act. So as noted above, if all 500 of those properties listed on the register do not become designated, they will be off the register for 5 years. And if a planning application comes in and is deemed complete for any of those sites without them being on the register, then we can't put them, we can't move to designate them. New legislation further tightening timelines around the designation process makes consultation and obtaining owner concurrence nearly impossible. New legislation will now require that designated buildings meet 2 out of the 9 criteria, rather than previously requiring 1 out of 9. New legislation now requires that a collection of buildings meet 3 out of 9 of the criteria prior to being designated as a district. So this will require us now to extend the timeline for designation for the Main Street East corridor, allowing the consultants to reassess the area under the new legislation. So in full summary of a full summary of the legislative changes were provided by our legal counsel on the memo or the report prepared by staff. So I've provided the link on the slide for anyone who would like to review that document, and it outlines them in more detail. And there is some additional ones that aren't as impactful to us directly. And then we also received a change in our Ontario regulation. So previously, we had Ontario Regulation 906, which is our criteria for determining significance in pursuit of designation. So that's now been amended, and we now have Ontario Regulation 56922. It's very similar. The headlines have been removed, and it now has 9 different criteria listed. And then new to the regulation is criteria now for the evaluation of districts. So this is just a summary of some of the more impactful changes, but as noted, all of them are in the staff report. So in order to address these changes and to ensure the protection of our community, staff are recommending the following for the committee's endorsement. So number 1, the prioritization of properties on the Municipal Heritage Register be undertaken, and that staff and committee focus a significant amount of time towards the designation of properties that meet the criteria as prescribed under Ontario Regulation 56922, and that the Heritage Conservation District study along Main Street East be updated in accordance with the new legislation, now that Bill 23 has been proclaimed by the Lieutenant Governor, and that the committee establish a working group focused on the research of properties on the register and the priority list prepared by committee, council, and staff. And that a standing item be added to the agenda for the working group to present their findings, and that the committee work with the community to identify notable cultural heritage value and help gain support from heritage homeowners while designation is being pursued. In order to ensure that the maximum number of properties on the register are protected prior to losing their protections, as noted above, it is recommended that the committee establish an additional working group with the focus on members meeting and conducting research. Staff will review all research prepared by the committee. If the committee is agreeable to the establishment of this working group, an overview of how to conduct research will be prepared by staff and shared with the committee. And finally, in summary, these legislative changes do present a significant change in our approach to conserve the town of Grimsby's cultural heritage. In order to move forward, providing significant protection, it is recommended that the above listed recommendations be endorsed by the Heritage Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Bianca. Mayor Jordan, you had a question or comment?
Thank you, Chair, through you to Bianca. Is there any way we can put easements on all 500? And like, because where that was done for permits, is there a way that we can think strategically and use the tools that we have still to put easements on these properties so it just kind of ties them up and it's just some way to protect our heritage? And I don't know if you have a comment on that, but I would like one if possible.
Bianca?
Thank you, through you, the chair. So the easement agreement that we're talking about today for 44 Park Road North is an easement between the property owner and the town. So we could only do that if the property owner was agreeable to it. But we're definitely looking at our tools that we have available to us and trying to get strategic to think how we're going to protect these buildings, because 500 is a huge undertaking. In our department, we have been prioritizing them. We have 2 additional designations today, but like I said, upwards of a month for one. So it is a huge undertaking, but we are looking at all of our tools to make sure that we have some kind of control before we just have to approve a demo permit. So it's definitely a big concern to us.
Thank you.
Other questions? Member Riley?
Good, you got it there. Through you, Chair. I got a couple I'm going to go through because it's obviously a big impact. And just I read through the legislation previously in the fall before it had come to force, and you've noted some of the big impacts. So just thinking strategy-wise on this one, that's the big thing. Is it's not some. I mean, obviously we got to work harder, but I think it's working smarter too. And one of the things, the first question I wanted to put to you is, we're obviously not the only town in this. There's lots of towns in Ontario. Is there any way we can try and leverage, and maybe is there a community of the heritage planners We can talk strategy with them, see what they're doing. Are there other towns that don't have 500 that we might be able to borrow some resources and appeal to their love of heritage? And just thinking around what can we do, just trying to think through different strategies, just in, addressing the big looming list of 500 without having to let them all go for 5 years.
Bianca?
Through you, the chair, we do have a Heritage Planners Network, and I believe there's upward of 40,000 properties in Ontario that are going to be directly impacted by this. It's a common concern amongst the whole field. Everyone is very concerned, and we're all working very closely. Everyone's sharing notes with each other to ultimately protect these resources. As for other communities, I couldn't speak to that directly, but I know a lot of properties, like on average, amongst, I think they looked at about 45 different municipalities and 40,000 properties, the average designation is 2 to 3 a year. And actually, it's 1 to 2 a year, and our average is 2 to 3. So it's a huge undertaking for all of Ontario. So I am closely looking with my colleagues, and we're looking for solutions.
Thank you, Bianca. Member Evans?
Thank you. I have a couple questions. I wanted to know the cost of, when you say it's 1 month, what would the cost be? Is that more than one staff member? Is that multiple staff members? Do we have an idea of cost? And the other question is, what is the Heritage Trust prepared to do for the heritage homeowners? I've raised concerns before about insurance and that, and there needs to be more support for heritage homeowners. We have one grant in this community, $50,000. If you're looking at us having 500 homes, that grant isn't really going to do much. So what is the town, and I guess my question would be to Mayor Jordan and the councillors that are present, what is council prepared to do to also support these homeowners? Heritage has repeatedly been said of the significance in this town. I own a heritage home, and I know the mud, sweat, and tears that go into it sometimes. Well, my friends are cruising down to Niagara-the-Lake for a wine tour. I'm at home sanding my front door and refinishing it. So there's a lot of, there's equity from these people. It's not just financial equity, it's their time. And as I heard, many of us in the community at the council meetings, there's upset with the Bill 23. Well, you also have to be aware to what impact this could have on homeowners that have always respected heritage. And I think there's always a civil responsibility and a fiduciary responsibility as well. So that needs to be part of the consideration for what might be proposed here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if you have a comment on that, Bianca, or not. It's a little bit beyond the scope of this discussion, but if you want to touch on that, I'll leave it up to you.
Sure. Through you, the chair. So I just wanted to note, yes, we do have that grant in place right now, but I know the region is assessing their programs. So we are preparing our report for our council to go look at those grants and look at some of the options we have. And we do have the heritage homeowners in mind for those pieces, and understanding how much all these restorations cost. So that's something that's under review right now. So I just wanted to note that. In addition to, we also provide support to our homeowners through our heritage consultation service. So we go on site to our heritage homeowners and provide them with one-on-one consultation advice and help put together conservation plans so they don't feel as overwhelmed by the undertaking. So I just wanted to note both of those programs that are in place with the town. I can't speak to the impact and how council will handle it, but I'll leave that to them. And then the other comment was about the hours for a designation. This is within our work plan prioritization of these designations. So it's something that we have been working towards. So we luckily do have some reports that we've been working on, so we'll be using those first, but we continue to move forward similar to how we are today. We're just going to try and be strategic with where we put our time, essentially. So.
I have a question. So one of the things that Heritage Resource Inventory does is it gives the town more time when it comes to demolition permits. Could we create some sort of demolition control list that is not a heritage inventory? It's a demolition control list of properties that are of significance within the town of Grimsby. We don't need to even use the word heritage, but we just take these properties, put them on a different list, called the heritage control, or not a demolition control list. So that would give us, rather than having to deal with all of these at once, that would give us the opportunity to deal with them when they came up. So there's an asterisk beside them for our building department, and if they do come up for demolition, it gives staff adequate time to prepare a report and look at the designation of that property, rather than dealing with 500 properties all at once. Is that something that, I don't know if that's legal or not, or if that's something we can do, but I'd like to hear from you.
Through the chair, so I'll start with the idea of just having a list. Under applicable law for the Ontario Building Code, they have to have some kind of mechanism why they can't give out the permit. We can't just withhold it because of the list. But there is some tools that we're looking at in the form of like demolition control bylaws and things like that. The thing we just have to keep in mind is under the Ontario Heritage Act, it speaks to prescribed events. So we're getting additional information on what a prescribed event means. If it means a demolition permit, then that option isn't something we could pursue. But this is kind of some of the things we're doing as a department, looking at all these different tools under the Planning Act, under the Heritage Act, that we can essentially do that, so that, you know, these buildings still have some level of protection. And a demolition control bylaw could allow council to have that opportunity to review our historic housing stock, but really it's all housing stock in the town, any viable housing stock. So that's the intent behind that tool, so we just have to see if it's appropriate in this arena. Thank you,
Bianca. Member Evans?
Thank you, through the chair. So in terms of that, Councillor DeFlavio, I believe there already is in place, so if someone was to proceed with work without a permit, it could be a significant fine for them. I believe it can go up to $100,000. So there is certain policy already in place. And if they were to demolish heritage, is it $1 million fine if they were to just demolish it?
You can answer that, Bianca, if you want. But these are houses that aren't, the 500 that we're talking about are currently on the Heritage Register and will be removed from the Heritage Register because they can only stay on there for 2 years. So they will not, none of the heritage rules would apply to these houses. That's why it's an issue, right? So these are houses that are not designated, but are of heritage importance, so do you want to clarify a little bit further, Bianca?
Thank you, through you, the chair. So as Councillor DeFlavio was saying, these are the properties are on the register, so they have demolition control up to 60 days. So once they come off that list, then there's no protection in place. Someone could just submit a demolition permit. So a lot of the inventory that is important to the community is on that list right now. So that's why we're working to designate key features from both a social standpoint, from like an architectural standpoint. But yeah, after those 2 years, they come off. So now we're looking at alternative tools to somehow still have a mechanism that allows us to take a second look before we issue a demolition permit. To speak to fines, there's fines for designation up to $1 million, and then the register is up to $50,000, and for both of them, it's per property owner.
Does that clarify? Yeah, of course.
In terms of, though, proceeding, if it was just work, the permits themselves would still stick if there's a fine, just as it would for anybody in the community?
through you, the chair, yes, the Building Code Act would stand.
But just to clarify, a demolition permit could be, there's nothing to keep a demolition permit from being applied for and granted, because there's no longer anything that would bring this up as a property of importance to our building department. So in other words, when you drive down Main Street, there are a few homes that are designated, but we still think of all of those homes on Main Street West. So if I'm driving from Nellis Manor to the other end of Grimsby, I'm looking at large homes and old historic homes. Out of those houses, there's maybe, I don't know, 8 or 10 that are actually designated, but we think of many of those homes as part of the heritage of Grimsby. Once we no longer have a list that allows us to protect those homes from demolition, they're just another house that can be demolished any homeowner has the right to demolish their home and build another house on that property, as long as they meet the criteria that the building department sets out. There's nothing to protect the heritage of those buildings anymore after these lists are removed. So this is a big deal. When we think about the heritage of Grimsby and the character of Grimsby and what we think about as the character of Grimsby, this can completely alter what we think of as, heritage districts and just heritage in general in the town. And my concern is that we have large properties with heritage homes on them that once you demolish that they might not be designated heritage homes, but they are definitely homes that are heritage in nature and would probably be designated if we went through the process. Once you demolish that home, you might be able to build 2 or 3, so it becomes worth it to apply for a demolition permit once there's no longer restrictions in place. So we need to do everything possible and as quickly as possible to see what we can do to make sure that doesn't happen, in my humble opinion. Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Member Riley?
Through you, Chair. I have a couple more that I wanted to go through. Just, I think, Bianca, I'm going to direct these ones to you. With the legal opinion that you sought on the legislation change and the current impact, are we certain that those 500 are absolutely on the clock has essentially started ticking? And in sort of follow up to that one, if yes, then did the clock start ticking the moment it came into force on the 3rd or the 4th?
Bianca?
Thank you, through the chair. So yes, all 500 will be impacted. I'm saying upwards of 500. I think there's like 520 or something like that. It did come into effect, but they retroactively put it to Jan 1. So it came out like 3rd or 4th. I think it came out on the 4th. And they put it straight to Jan 1. So as of January 1, 2023, we have 2 years. On the 2nd anniversary, they're going to come off. So that's why we're working towards that priority list so that we can get a move on these pieces.
Member Riley?
Through you, Chair. Just with the recommendation around, I guess, two things. One, I think it would be good for us to maybe, I know you recommend the working committee, maybe a step before that is to have a bit of a strategic planning session to kind of get a lot of these ideas. I've got a lot of thoughts on this one. I'm sure others do as well. So maybe we can amend to suggest that as a starting point. And I guess follow up to that, and part of, again, kind of the concern around just asking the committee to jump in and help is I just don't know how much help we're going to provide in that regard. And the follow-up question around that is committee size. We were obviously a lot bigger last January. There was a big change then, and I just know, do we need to recruit for more? Do we have plans? Is the committee going to continue? And there was talk about having to apply again. So sorry, I jumbled a bunch of stuff in there. I'll let you try and dissect that.
Do you want to answer that, Bianca?
Thank you, through the chair. So I'll start with the committee. We'll be going out for appointment with this new term of council, and we will send you the application, and yeah, I'll have to go through the reapplication process. And I think your idea of us having a meeting to talk strategy, I think that's a great idea. I'd love to get all of your thoughts on it, even if you want to, start sending some of that through our email with one another. Just time is just so important here. So, and I think the other piece is if you can go out in the community and just get those homeowners that want to be designated and just bring them to us. Owner concurrence makes things so much easier. And just spreading the importance of, we need to do this. If heritage is so important to this community, we need to do this. And it's the obstacles that are going to eat up all the time, right? So that's really important. And then, yeah, I don't know the timing this committee has, but even if, spend a day at the archives, pick one site and get all the information they have and send it to us, then that's us not having to start right at the beginning. So that was kind of the idea behind the working groups. And then we would put together a tool, like a toolkit that's how-to. And I know everyone at the archives are so great. Like you go in and you just give them the site you're looking at and they'll bring you everything they have. And it's a great starting point. So if the committee is interested, we will give you the resources and the tools to do that research. But definitely the conversations, they need to start right away. So, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I do have a motion to, I need a mover and a seconder. Do you want to put it back up? So I'll read it again, but.
Yep. Share my screen.
It just goes through the properties of municipal heritage to be reviewed. I need a mover and seconder for that motion. Moved by Councilor Cristangi. Seconded by Mayor Jordan. So resolved that HR 2302, new regulations under the Ontario Heritage Act, Bill 23, and staff recommendations be received, and that prioritization of the properties on the Municipal Heritage Register be undertaken, and that the staff and committee focus on a significant amount of effort toward the designation of properties that meet the criteria as prescribed under Ontario Regulation 569/22, and that the Heritage Conservation District study along Main Street East be updated in accordance with the new legislation now that Bill 23 has been proclaimed by Lieutenant Governor, that the committee establish a working group focused on research of properties on Municipal Heritage Register and priority list prepared by the committee, council, and staff, and that a standing item be added to each agenda for the working group to present their findings, and that the committee work with community members to identify notable cultural value and help gain support from heritage homeowners while designation is being pursued. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Next, we have 2012-3 designation report for 8 St. Andrews Avenue. Garrett?
Thank you, through you, the chair. And I just wanted to note that for the following 2 designations, we have owner concurrence for both. Staff recommend that the property at 8 St. Andrews Avenue be designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Staff have concluded that the property has met 6 out of the 9 prescribed criteria of the Ontario Regulation 56922. The property meets the criteria for design and physical value because 8 St. Andrews Avenue is an arts and crafts style bungalow constructed in the 1940s by the well-known Schaefer brothers. The brothers who constructed the house had a reputation within Grimsby for building high-quality homes using high-end materials. The craftsmanship can be represented by the use of curved wood elements such as the arched front door and storm door. The complex hexagonal roof would have been built by a highly skilled tradesperson, as buildings of this era were still being built with hand-cut roofs and rafters. The house has a whimsical style which can only be achieved through thoughtful design and attention to detail. The property meets the criteria for historical and associative values because the land the house sits on was originally inhabited by the Neutral peoples and was in close proximity to Main Street West, which would have been an Indigenous travel route at the base of the escarpment. After the Crown land grants were distributed, the Beamer family were some of the first loyalists to settle in the area. By 1790, John Beamer and his family emigrated from New Jersey, bringing with them an ox, plow, and a handful of apple seeds, and by 1800 had a successful apple orchard and sawmill at the base of the escarpment. The Grimsby Independent makes special mention of the Schaefer brothers' business experiencing a boom in new builds and restoration in 1943 and 44. The house at 8 St. Andrews Avenue, for which the development contract was signed in October 1944, is therefore an important and representative example of the homes built during the height of the brothers' building boom. The property meets the criteria for contextual value because the parcel of land was later sold to a developer who subdivided the lots, creating the Lakeview Schaefer survey. The subdivision holds the Schaefer namesake due to the high concentration of houses they constructed on Nels Boulevard, Murray Street, and St. Andrews Avenue. The lot at 8 St. Andrews and the lot to the south, number 6, were both bought by Archie Eiton, who worked in real estate. Archie commissioned the Schaefer brothers in 1943 to build the current dwellings. That same year, Archie sold both of the properties and the newly constructed houses. The dwelling at 8 St. Andrews Avenue is built in the arts and crafts style. The overlying theme was that the house was to be a living element within the natural environment, factoring in the landscape, sun exposure, views, and topography. Based on the assessment of cultural heritage value or interest, staff have recommended that the property at 8 St. Andrews Avenue be designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Garrett. Any questions for Garrett? Member Evans?
I was just wondering, what other homes have we designated by the Schaefer brothers?
Do you have that answer, Bianca?
Through the chair, I believe this is the first one, but I'd have to double check. I think it's the first one.
Okay. Any other questions? So I have a motion to designate. I need a mover and a seconder, please. Member Riley, seconded by Mayor Jordan. Resolved that 8 St. Andrews Avenue be designated under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act. That a notice of intention to designate be issued in accordance with the Ontario Heritage Act. All in favor? That's carried. Next, we have report 12.4, designation report for 115 Gibson Street. Garrett, you're a popular person tonight.
Thank you, through you, the chair. Staff recommend that the property at 115 Gibson Street be designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Staff have concluded that the property has met 4 out of the 9 prescribed criteria of the Ontario Regulation 56922. The property meets the criteria for design and physical value because 115 Gibson Street is a 1.5-story gable front stone foundation structure with a wooden frame. The house is one of the earliest buildings remaining on Gibson Street, with ties to the Nels and Gibson families. The 1.5-story gable front structure is located very close to Gibson Street, formerly Gibson Avenue, formerly Mill Road, with 40 Mile Creek running through the rear of the property. The structure displays characteristics typical of a commercial structure. The property has definitive association with the notable United Empire Loyalist Nels family of Grimsby. The property meets the criteria for historical and associative values because the Nels family built 2 mills on either side at the outer edge of this property by the upper bridge, a grist mill on the west side of the 40 and a sawmill on the east side. The Nels sold the property to the west of the 40 to Richard and Elizabeth Allison by 1862. The Allison family owned the land and operated the grist mill that had been converted to steam power by W.H. Gurney, who was married to Maria Nels. Allison's daughter, Emmeline Allison, who became accomplished at working with steam power, became renowned in America for taking care of the Women's Pavilion Steam Power at the Philadelphia 1876 World Expo. In 1866, Robert Lilly Gibson bought the land and structure at 115 Gibson Street. Robert Gibson built the adjacent Gibson House at 114 Gibson Avenue with Grimsby sandstone in the Gothic style. The property meets the criteria for contextual value because Robert Gibson was able to make his new business a success due to the need for stone for updating local railways, construction of the Welland Canal, and the need for stone to replace wooden bridges. The dwelling at 115 Gibson Street is significant in supporting the character of Gibson Street. The scale and architectural style of the house show similarities to early built houses within the town, featuring a similar architectural style to Georgian style, with symmetrical openings, gable roofs, and cornice returns, which are typical of buildings of that era. The evolution of different architectural styles and various setbacks provide an insight as to how the historic corridor evolved over time. Although we do not have a definitive build date, the building has the potential to have been built around the turn of the 19th century. Based on the assessment of cultural heritage value and interest, staff have recommended that the property at 44 Park Road North be designated under 115 Gibson, thank you, under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Thanks.
Thank you, Garrett. Any questions for Garrett? Seeing none, I need a mover and a seconder for the report. I've got Member Evans and Member Riley. Resolved that 115 Gibson Street be designated under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and that the notice of intention to designate be issued in accordance with the Ontario Heritage Act. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Is there any new business? Bianca, I've got you written down here.
Thank you, through you, the chair. If you could just share the screen. I do have an update for you guys. It's a pretty sad update, but yesterday we received notification from the property owners at 224 Main Street East, the Udell House, and the beech tree on the property. I guess when they had bought the house, they noticed there was no leaves growing on the one side of the building, one side of the tree, and so they made it a priority to get an arborist on site. The arborist said that the building was, the tree was dead, and that they needed to remove it immediately because it posed a risk to the family, as well as you can see in the picture, the really notable ice house. So we had our town's arborist meet them on site this morning. I was able to go with them, and within 5 minutes, he confirmed that it was dead as well, and that it did pose a risk to the family and the ice house. So we were able to go on site today. We took pictures of the tree within the landscape, all over the property, and then from Main Street as well. So I just wanted to provide the update to the committee, and unfortunately, it'll be going down tomorrow.
Thank you, Bianca. That is definitely sad news. Any questions or from members of the committee for Bianca? All right, seeing none, is there any other new business? Seeing no new business, the meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everybody.